Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Thank you guys so much for being here. I got a pretty interesting episode coming up for you guys today. I hope you guys are very excited. Wow, we're here. 2026. We finally made it. By the way, apologies that I'm not currently recording using my camera. There seems to be some kind of technical difficulty. I think there's an issue with the battery. Maybe the battery is worn out. It keeps overheating. So I got some new batteries on the way. They'll be here tomorrow. But you guys will just have to bear with me in the meantime. I do apologize. But it's going to be a excellent episode nonetheless. You guys are going to enjoy it. We're going to be going over several things, namely Vivek Ramaswamy's decision to step away from social media. We're going to be going over the blowback that Nick Fuentes received for his position on the Venezuelan Operation Absolute Resolve. And we might even get into the ICE shooting that took place today in Minneapolis. But before we get into any of that, I do just want to say briefly, we made it. We made it to 2026. 2025 was a hell of a year. And I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm referring to. It was a hell of a year, literally and figuratively. And I mean, Lord have mercy. We can go through the list. Mike Waltz being fired from his role as National Security Advisor because he was having unauthorized contact with the Prime Minister of Israel. That's one. We could start there. How about no mass deportations? How about 600,000 Chinese students? How about maxing out the H-1Bs? How about people being kidnapped off the streets and deported and losing their visa status and having it revoked for criticizing Israel? How about Bari Weiss and Larry Ellison buying up the media and TikTok? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The genocide in Gaza. Now you got Trump and his buddies who want to build a Riviera, Silicon Valley 2.0 on the graves of dead Palestinian women and children through Jared Kushner and the Gulf countries. This is literally something that's in the making. Bibi Netanyahu visiting America 4 or 5 times now. Another memorandum of understanding, $12 billion in aid. The Epstein files being buried. We still don't have any information on Thomas Crooks. What about all these mass shootings taking place? It's insanity what's going on in this country. The war with Iran. Israel violating ceasefires whenever the hell they want. Charlie Kirk being assassinated, all the crazy conspiracy theories that came out afterwards from Candace Owens, who we'll get into in a second. The right-wing civil war, the Tucker Cost, America Fest, the ascendancy of Nick Fuentes, the Gavin Wax drama and the fallout with the Young Republicans. I mean, what an insane year. Genuinely disorienting. I don't know what other word to use to describe it. It was a genuinely disorienting year. So thank God we made it through. Now, with that said, I want to say this to kind of expand. This year, we need to just do a better job as Americans holding each other to higher standards. And what I mean by that is people who promote flagrant conspiracy theories need to just be culled from the movement. Anybody who signal boosts conspiracy theories from people like Candace Owens, people who actually create the conspiracy theories, people like Morgan Ariel, people like Evan Kilgore, Ian Carroll, they need to just be completely purged from the movement, culled from the movement. And don't take that literally. People are going to take that out of context. They're going to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm saying figuratively, they need to be removed from the movement. They cannot be associated under any circumstances. They are dead weight. That is literally all they are. We need to work on refining the movement, purifying the movement, perfecting the movement, and being as lethal and precise with our information as possible. That is literally the only way we will succeed. The establishment means business. We need to mean business too. I don't know how else to put it. And this year, seriously, after all the propaganda that was thrown our way last year with Epstein, they tried to bury that. With Israel and the genocide in Gaza, they tried to bury that. They tried to literally manipulate us into thinking that nothing was going bad, that nothing was going wrong over there. No innocent people were killed. No journalists were being killed. No civilians were being killed. No children were being killed. They were literally finding bullet casings lodged in between the skulls of toddlers. Children are being shot in the face over there. You have people in the Knesset openly advocating for the complete genocide of all Palestinians. So they tried to propagandize us with that. Fortunately, we were smart enough to realize, well, maybe not all of you, but I believe that most of the people watching this video were smart enough to realize that it was all propaganda from the very beginning. And there's plenty of evidence on social media to refute all these narratives. And we know about the $7,000 Club. We know about Emily Austin and Shabbos Kestenbaum and Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, all these Jews. Let's just call them what they are. They're Jews. We know what they're up to. Buying up the media, hiring IDF soldiers to work at their own media corporations. We know exactly what the game is. We know who runs the think tanks. We know who runs the Ivy League institutions. We know all about the Jewish influence on our society. But people who want to blame everything on Israel and the Jews without any kind of critical thinking or evidence, those people need to just be completely sidebarred. Completely sidebarred. Or they will drag all of us to hell. So people like Candace Owens, Alex Jones, at this point even Tucker Carlson, Evan Kilgore, Morgan Ariel, there's plenty of others. They need to just be completely isolated, quarantined, full stop. And as Americans, we got to do a better job being able to discern good information from bad information. We can't be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Anytime Trump says something, anytime there's a big story in the press, anytime something gets a lot of likes on Twitter, we got to do better. We just got to do better. And now AI is becoming more powerful and more intelligent. Oh my God, the amount of lying that we're going to have to be able to discern, it's going to be ridiculous. I've gotten to a point now where I assume 60 to 70% of the things I see on Twitter are AI. If it's not real human beings engaging with each other, I just assume it's fake most of the time. And it's going to get worse. So we're going to have to be on the lookout for that. So anyways, that's just my spiel. We got to do better. We got to think more critically. We got to be more rational going into 2026. That's literally our only hope. And we got to just separate ourselves and delineate from the conspiratards and the crazies. So that's just, these are kind of first principles. These are first orders of concern. I wanted to address these things first. Now, here's what I want to say, and this actually relates to social media. We're going to be talking about our good old friend Vivek Ramaswamy today. Yes, the one and only Vivek Ramaswamy. You know, it's funny. Some people say his name is Vivek Ramaswamy, which is actually kind of funny. Vivek Ramaswamy. It's kind of suave in a way, isn't it? It's like Don Juan. You know, Don Juan, he's walking on the beach, hair blowing in the wind. He has 3 buttons on his button-up shirt undone. Got his jeans rolled up to his knees, looking like a suave, classy guy. Vivek Ramaswamy gives me very much the same kind of vibe. It's very classy. It's very classy. It's very suave, you know, Vivek Ramaswamy. I like it. I like it. So anyway, it's kind of funny. It's like a Renaissance man name. Renaissance man. I used to say that word all the time. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. The reason we're going to be talking about Vivek Ramaswamy today is because he said he's going to be taking a break from social media. Now, he wrote an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago titled, "Social Media is a Trap for Politicians." And the gist of it is that he's taking a break from social media because he feels like it's become so toxic, so hostile, it's fraught with foreign influence, all these sorts of things. And off rip, let's just be real. The reason Vivek Ramaswamy is leaving social media is not because the internet is toxic. It's not because the internet is hostile. It's not even because the internet is fraught with foreign influence. Yes, all those things are true, but it's always been that way, and he knows that. The reason he's leaving is because he's getting cooked. And he can't take it. That's just the truth. There's no other way around it. The internet has always been toxic. The internet has always been hostile. It's always been like the Wild Wild West. Vivek knows that very well. And if the toxicity and the hostility and the foreign influence were serving his campaign interests, he would not care. He's leaving because it's hurting his feelings. It's that simple. And it's distorting this inflated sense of self that he has. He feels like he's this go-getter, this once-in-a-lifetime talent, once-in-a-generation talent. And then you got people calling him brown and telling him to go back to India in his mentions. Now, I will say this. I do feel for Vivek. Obviously, you don't like going on social media as it pertains to myself, I guess, and seeing people say, we want to nuke Africa, we want total nigger death, we want to send them all back. You're a brownoid, you're a third worlder, you're a low IQ subhuman. Of course, I don't like seeing that. Doesn't make me feel good. That's why I don't really look at it that often anymore. Because it's just like, what's the point? It's counterproductive. So I feel for Vivek. I understand where he's coming from. And on a very fundamental level, I think what he's doing is wise. People may disagree, but I think what he's doing is wise. Honest to God, I do. If for no other reason than just for your own mental sanity, for your own emotional stability. Vivek has said many times he wants to be a better leader. He wants to be a better father. He wants to be a happier man. And I support all of those things. And there's a kind of positive downstream effect from stepping away from social media when you think about it. If your goal is to be a good leader, you need mental clarity. If you want mental clarity, you need emotional stability. And if you want emotional stability, you have to avoid things that destabilize your emotions, that dysregulate your emotions. Now, this doesn't mean you got to be a pussy. If you're a politician, if you're a head of state, if you're a statesman, you need to be able to withstand negativity, criticism, the press. You need to be able to remain calm under pressure. You need to be able to retain clarity of thought even when you're stressed. I agree, obviously. But that is different from subjecting yourself to negative internet harassment for no reason other than because you're doing it out of habit. That's completely pointless and self-destructive. That does nothing for your campaign. That does nothing for your skills. That does nothing for your individual improvement or development. So on a very basic level, him stepping away from social media is a wise choice. And there's a kind of useful framework for this. If you guys can remember, Ben Shapiro did a interview in October of 2025 with Ezra Klein. And he was talking about lions and scavengers. Now, you guys might not agree with Ben Shapiro's appraisal of who is a lion and who isn't a lion and who is a scavenger and who's not a scavenger. But I think at the very least, it's a useful framework. Lions and scavengers. Now, what are lions and scavengers? A lion is somebody who is a go-getter, a builder. People who have their own platforms, people who run institutions, people who work in the government, people who write their own blogs, people who write books, people who do speaking engagements. Those are lions, go-getters, builders, strivers, workers, thinkers, intellectuals. People like Thomas Sowell, people like Ross Douthat, people like Oren Cass, people like Yoram Hazony, people like Adrian Vermeule and Patrick Deneen and Bari Weiss. And you may not like Bari Weiss or Yoram Hazony. That's fine. I totally get where you guys are coming from. But Yoram Hazony started NatCon, which was a major speaking conference, and his intellectual milieu has had a major impact on J.D. Vance. Bari Weiss sold the Free Press for $150 million, and now she's the chief editor at CBS. You guys might not like them. You know, they're Jews, they're Israeli spies. I would never negate that. But they are go-getters, and they do bust their behind. And for that alone, they are lions. They're builders. They're networkers. They're thinkers. They're influencers. They're influential people. Those are lions. Then you have scavengers. Now, scavengers, on the other hand, are people who are constantly taking on the mantle of victimhood. They're saying, I'm being persecuted, I'm being censored, I'm being suppressed, they're coming after me. People who constantly incite racial resentment, people whose movements are built on racial resentment or grievances, people who are constantly invoking this idea of civilizational or national decline, people that are always scapegoating minorities or other groups of people that aren't a part of their own group. These are scavengers. The conspiracy theorists, people who blame everything on government ineptitude, people who always portray or frame politics in this existential end-of-the-world way. Those are scavengers. People who are grifters, opportunists. These are scavengers. Now, you guys may disagree with the names that I'm about to give you on who fits into this category, but this is my opinion. We're talking about people like Steve Bannon, people like Jack Posobiec, people like Matt Walsh, people like Candace Owens, people like Steve Bannon. I think I said Steve Bannon already, but whatever. We'll say his name twice because he's twice the scavenger. Laura Loomer, Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes. These people are scavengers. Most of their attention and most of their engagement comes from drama, comes from victim narratives, comes from conspiracies, comes from scapegoating, comes from feeding into outrage, polarization. These are the scavengers. And unfortunately, with the way the incentive structures on social media, especially platforms like X, are laid out, is the scavengers tend to be the most influential. They tend to have the biggest platforms. They tend to get the most engagement. They tend to have the largest followings. They tend to be the most influential. Because there is a perverse incentive to feed into constant outrage, take advantage of people's emotions, take advantage of people's limbic system, flood them with fear and reactionary content, and they will flock to your channel. They will retweet you, they will comment, they will like, they will share, they will save, all that kind of stuff. And then what happens? The most reactionary, the most opportunistic, the most grievance-motivated people begin to dominate the feed. And all the lions get drowned out. That's why there really is no point in going on social media if you're a politician. You're going to be in there with scavengers, people who are looking for a reason to tear you down, people who are looking for a reason to come after you, people who are fiending for attention. They want likes, they want clout, they want shares, so they'll say negative, mean, nasty things about you for engagement. This is nothing new. So that's the second reason why what he's doing makes perfect sense. And this is kind of the last reason why I agree with what Vivek is doing here. It isn't really a good or useful instrument for understanding where the conversation is or where your voters are or where the constituents in Ohio are, if you're Vivek. If you guys can recall, there was a poll that came out in, I believe, August of 2025, and it said that Nick Fuentes had a 6% approval rating, and everybody on the left started running with it. Kyle Kalinske has been talking about it on his show. He says Nick Fuentes only has a 6% approval rating. Nobody likes Nick Fuentes. Yeah, but when you actually look behind the curtain and you actually investigate and scrutinize the methodology behind the poll, you realize it's a sham. It's complete rubbish. Total rubbish. The poll that they're talking about that says Nick Fuentes only has a 6% approval rating was literally gathered by this researcher or researchers. I don't know if it was one or if it was several, but they distributed their survey through pop-up ads on utility apps, on shopping apps, on cashback reward apps, on streaming apps, on games. So people would be going through their apps on their phone and then they would get a pop-up for this survey. I'm sure the majority of the people who got it just clicked off of it. But 700 people responded to the survey. And they asked them, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump or this administration or where the country is going? And then they asked about Nick Fuentes. That was one of the line items. And it said 6% of the people had a favorable view of Fuentes, 33% didn't, and like 63% didn't know who he was. Now, conveniently, people leave out that part. They leave out the part where it says 61% don't even know who he is. But 33% had a favorable view, 6% had an unfavorable view. But the way that they went about acquiring this data and these results was conspicuous. First off, you don't even know the populations of the people who are clicking on these surveys. You don't have any information about these populations, whether they're young, whether they're old, whether they're women, whether they're men, all these sorts of things. There's all these kinds of unknown quantities. You don't know about their median household income. You don't know about their college education. You know very little information about these people. So to take 700 people off of these apps and act as if this is representative of a country of hundreds of millions is a complete, it's just a ridiculous notion. That's not to say 700 people can be representative of the country, although typically you want to hit about 1,000. The Gallup polls use about 1,000. But it has to be at random. It has to be at random. It can't just be based on the kinds of people that use these apps. And it needs to be representative of the actual country. So that's the first flaw they made with this study about Fuentes and this 6% approval rating. And then the second problem is the way they scored it, the way they weighed it. There was an overwhelming number of white people who responded to this survey, and there wasn't that many minorities who responded to the survey. So what the researchers decided they were going to do was they were going to decrease the weight of the white respondents to 0.6 and increase the weight of the minorities to 1.3. And what this does is it completely skews the results, completely skews them. It gives way too much weight to the minorities. Now, if 20 black people whose responses were valued at double what the white respondents were, it makes it seem like this is what the entire black community thinks or what the entire Hispanic community thinks, because you put so much weight on such a small number of people's responses. And even then, let's be real. In this survey, Nick Fuentes had like an 11% favorability rating from black people, a 12% unfavorability rating from, 11% favorability from blacks, 12% favorability from Hispanics, and about 33% unfavorability from blacks, about 32% unfavorability from Hispanics. But let's be real, if you got Nick Fuentes in a room with politically engaged, median, voter who happen to be black, they're all Democrats. Do you think that these folks actually would support Nick Fuentes? 11%? I can't wrap my head around that. So the results are just very shoddy to begin with. So that's the point that I'm making here. It's like you can't use these polls that they put on Twitter that gain a lot of traction as a good measurement of how much support you actually have. Who knows if Nick Fuentes has a 6% approval rating? Or it's really favorability. People keep saying approval. That's not the right word. It's 6% favorability. It's what happens when you talk for a long time. Throat gets dry. Who knows? And can you really rely on a 700-person sample survey as the be-all, end-all in this conversation? I think that's ridiculous. But people ran with it anyways because it got a lot of traction on Twitter. That's why you can't use Twitter as your news source. You actually have to look things up and read and do your due diligence. You cannot be lazy. You cannot be intellectually lazy. And so as this pertains to Vivek Ramaswamy, yeah, you shouldn't use Twitter to gauge where the actual voters are. Doesn't make sense. You think Bob, who's 42 years old, who's been divorced, who is a plumber in northern Ohio, who's been living there for 7 generations, or whose family's been there for 7 generations, who's worried about bills, who's worried about his mortgage, who's worried about taking care of his kids and paying child support. Do you think that guy is on Twitter arguing with groypers or voicing his opinion, about brown people and Vivek Ramaswamy? Maybe. You would think not, though, right? Probably not. You would assume that this person has more important things to do. There's polls from Harvard from 2024 where Vivek's favorability rating was at 35% and his unfavorability was at like 27%. 8-point difference in his favor. You have some other ones from Emerson that actually came out this December where his unfavorability rating was at 41% and his favorability was at 40%. So 1 point negative. You cannot use social media or Twitter as a useful measure for how popular you are because it's so heavily swayed by the algorithm. It cannot be trusted. You actually have to use polls and statistics to determine these things. The reason why Vivek, and here's what's even funny about this. The reason why I find this so hysterical as it pertains to Vivek and this whole conversation, the reason why people don't like him, why he has a 41% unfavorability rating, as per the most recent polls from Emerson, it's not because he's Indian. It's not because he's brown. It's not because he's Hindu. It's not even because he's too moderate. The reason why people have an issue with Vivek Ramaswamy in these polls is because they think he's an asshole. They think he's an annoying, pompous, brazen, pretentious asshole who made all of his money in finance. That's the reason why people don't like him. He's always going off on woke culture. He's always going off on affirmative action and DEI and the Democrats and the left. And he's constantly feeding into these grievance narratives from the right wing. We're being persecuted. We're under attack. So a lot of people in Ohio think he's just annoying. They think he's pompous. He's overconfident. He's super charismatic. He's like the right-wing Barack Obama. This young, charismatic guy, this outsider, this go-getter, striver, who's a minority, didn't grow up in DC, didn't grow up in New York City, grew up in a Midwestern town to immigrant parents, similar to Obama. And now he's gunning for governor of Ohio. But he's this young, energetic guy who thinks he knows everything. And he wants to tell other people what to do. And he thinks he has all the answers to the universe. And people find that obnoxious, actually. That's the reason why people don't like Vivek. It's not because of the shit that people on Twitter say. It's not because he's Indian or because he's brown or because he's Hindu. If you used that as a serious metric, of course you would assume that those are the reasons why people don't like him. But it's actually not. They think the guy is too extreme. They think he's too radical. He wants to bring these sweeping cultural and economic reforms to the state. Open it up for AI and all these cloud servers. And all this investment and finance and tech and biotech and medicine. Deregulations out the wazoo. And on top of that, he's young. Super young. So people don't like him for those very basic personal reasons about his personality. But if you looked at Twitter, you would think it's because he's an Indian, when that's actually not really the reason why. I'm sure maybe that's a part of it, but a very small one. But if you spent your whole day looking at Twitter, that's what you would think. Or listening to Nick Fuentes and his clips, that's what you would think. We don't like Vivek because he's brown. So Vivek getting off of Twitter is a wise choice. Focus on the real world, focus on your voters, focus on the campaign. Don't get sidetracked. Just lock in. Focus on getting that favorability up. Focus on affordability. Focus on winning in May. That is literally all that matters if you're Vivek. So I think what he's doing is wise. If it's distracting him, if it's stressing him out, if it's clouding his judgment, if he's getting into these pointless back and forth with scavengers, what is the point? There isn't one. It's completely self-defeating. So, in general, I support Vivek. Now, here's where I criticize him. For what? 2 years, 3 years now, Vivek Ramaswamy has been leading into this right-wing grievance narrative. This brown guy who is the voice of the white people. He's the white whisperer. He's going to go up there and tell you that your problems are with the left. Your problems are with wokeism. Your problems are with DEI. Your problems are with anti-white discrimination. Your problems are with the Democrats for stealing the 2020 election. Your problems are with, systemic racism against white people. So he's going to go up there. He's going to say all that. He's going to play into this right-wing, white man, disaffected youth grievance narrative. He's going to make these edgy quips on social media about Democrats. He's going to go after Biden. He's going to go after other Republicans. He's this young, polemical, provocative, sharp guy who thinks he knows it all. He's cocky. He's bravado. You know what I mean? But then you're going to pack up your ball and go home because people are calling you mean names on the internet. And look, like I said, I sympathize with Vivek. But if that's your whole persona, it looks weak. It just does. If your whole persona is this young, charismatic, confident guy who got rich in tech, who's smarter than you and can solve all your problems, and he's saying heritage Americans are not a real thing, and he wants to bring in more H-1Bs and all this kind of stuff, and he's young and he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and he's edgy and he's tough and he's, he's witty, you cannot fold at the beginning of 2026. It just looks weak. It looks like you're packing up your ball and going home. Jesus. And like I said, listen, I'm not against what he's doing. I don't see an issue with it. But just optically, it looks bad. It looks weak. It looks a bit cowardly. I'm just being real. He should have done this in the dark. He should have kept it low key. There was no need to write about this in the Wall Street Journal, this big piece. And I'm actually going to go over here to the Daily Beast and read some of this for you. Now, of course, we all know the Daily Beast is this very editorial, left-wing, edgy, anti-Republican publication. But it is funny to see what some of these people say. So here's what the article says. It says, after getting torched by his own party, Vivek Ramaswamy's latest social media meltdown ended with him rage quitting. Rage quitting, wow. Ended with him rage quitting the platform where the pile-on started. In a lengthy Wall Street Journal essay published this week, the Republican gubernatorial hopeful announced what he framed as a New Year's resolution, stepping away from Instagram and X after weeks of backlash from fellow conservatives. Quote, I deleted X and Instagram from my phone, unquote, he wrote, calling social media a trap for politicians who mistake online outrage for real-world sentiment. Ramaswamy said the self-imposed exile would free up time to engage with real-world Ohio, arguing that quitting social media would make him a better leader and a happier man. The decision, however, came only after his standing within the GOP took a noticeable hit, following a controversial speech last month at a Turning Point USA conference. At the event, Ramaswamy dismissed the concept of heritage Americans, calling it about as loony as anything the woke left has actually put up. He added, there is no American who is more American than somebody else. It's crazy talk. We believe in ideals. That is who we are. Clips of the remarks quickly spread online, triggering outrage from conservatives, accusing him of pandering and disloyalty. Conservative commentator William Wolf joined the pile-on with a thinly veiled jab captioned interesting, alongside an image of the Constitution's natural-born citizens clause. That's funny. The implication was clear. For parts of the right, Ramaswamy's rejection of heritage Americans runs headlong into long-standing ideas about who counts as truly American. While Ramaswamy insisted in his essay that the live audience reaction was overwhelmingly positive, claiming he received a standing ovation from more than 20,000 attendees, online backlash from conservatives told a very different story. In his essay, Ramaswamy says his socials were flooded with a flurry of racial slurs and bigoted remarks after his speech. Despite the dramatic sign-off, Ramaswamy's exit from social media is more symbolic than absolute. His political accounts will remain active, run by staffers who will continue posting messages and videos on his behalf. In effect, the candidate is still online just by proxy. So he's doing what I thought was the wisest thing to do. He says Ramaswamy used the moment to lecture fellow politicians, arguing that leaders who rely on social media to gauge public opinion are looking through a broken mirror. According to him, the issues voters actually care about, take-home pay, electric bills, and education, rarely trend online precisely because they are so universal. The GOP, however, has not responded kindly to this digital retreat. Casey Putsch, Ramaswamy's rival in the 2026 Ohio gubernatorial race, mocked the move on X, saying, quote, which is it, Vivek? Should politicians engage with their voters on social media or not? Why are you really leaving X? I'm not going anywhere. Wow, cooked. The episode also revived memories of Ramaswamy's earlier holiday controversy last Christmas, when he scolded American culture in a viral post where he suggested that immigrant parents raise better children than parents born in the United States. This seemingly annual controversy earned him the nickname Christmas Crashout, as the backlash to his latest remarks mounted. Whether Ramaswamy's social media detox sticks remains to be seen. Even he acknowledged the odds. If my current New Year's resolution resembles past ones, he wrote, I might be back to scrolling X by March. For now, though, the MAGA pile-on has claimed another digital casualty. So there you have it. Vivek Ramaswamy is taking a break from social media because he can't take the heat. Very simply. Like I said, I'm not against the move if it's going to make you a better man and a better leader, but don't announce it to the world. That's where he went wrong. He should have just kept it low-key. So that's my take on the Vivek Ramaswamy situation. Like I said, look, I hope he does well. I hope he does all right. I hope he does well. I hope he recuperates and regains his energy. And look, besides the scamming and the biotech stuff and the fact that 80% of the drugs that he marketed actually never reached the market, or rather 80% of the drugs that he had people invest in never reached the market. They all failed their trials. In spite of that, and in spite of the fact that he made most of his money from basically pharmaceutical schemes, he seems like an all right guy, and I wish him the best. I'm still gunning for Casey Putsch in Ohio because he's actually an Ohio native. His whole family's from Ohio. He's owned property in Ohio. He started a nonprofit in Ohio to help take care of other children. So I hope Casey Putsch wins. Seems like a real patriot. Seems like a genuine guy. Seems like his heart is in the right place. And seems like he wants the best for his state, and I'm sure he will pursue that. But as far as Vivek is concerned, good luck to him. Godspeed. We'll see what happens in May. Okay, now I want to talk about Nick Fuentes. I want to talk about some of the remarks he made on Telegram. And I will try to post some of the screenshots on the screen here so you guys can see what I'm referring to. But as you guys are already aware, I mean, I'm sure the whole world is aware at this point. 3 days ago, the Trump administration carried out a military operation in the capital of Venezuela. They bombed several areas of the city, critical infrastructure. The CIA was already on the ground collecting information. They had helicopters, aircraft, ships surrounding the coastline. And they had the military go in, and specifically the Delta Force go in, kidnap Maduro and his wife in the middle of the night, and bring them back to America to stand court or to stand trial. Now, here's the thing. Of course I support this operation. Of course I support American supremacy. Of course I support the American empire. I want America to be the most powerful country on earth forever. That is my wish. I want our country to thrive and succeed forever above all other countries. Of course that's what I want. I'm an American. Why would I want anything different? And to the extent that I agree, we should depose leaders and heads of state that work against American interests, but not only work against American interests, but work with each other against our interests. To the extent that those things occur, I believe those leaders should be deposed. They should be removed and replaced with leaders who facilitate American supremacy. That's why I support going after Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, the Ayatollah of Iran, Nicolas Maduro, whoever the hell is running Cuba. I support that. Because it's basic geopolitical math. Less enemies, more friends equals better time for America. It's very simple. But the issue is this, and you guys might say this is cucked, but it is what it is. We have had an international order. We have had standards in the way that we conduct international affairs since World War II, since 1945. It's been 80 years. We have the Geneva Conventions. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have international law. We have the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council. All of that stuff exists for a reason. And the reason why is to prevent imperial ambition from escalating into a global conflict, literally, a nuclear holocaust. So I support international law. And people will say international law is fake, international law is gay, international law is lame. Fair enough, fine. I don't support international law over national sovereignty. And of course, on some level, international law is a veneer. If it can't be enforced, then it's not real. The law is only real to the extent it can be enforced. But what I mean by international law as a veneer is if two nations are in an existential threat, or rather, if two nations are in a war for their survival, fuck what the Geneva Conventions say, and what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, and what the UN says. You're fighting for your national survival. Nothing else matters beyond that. No international law, no convention, none of that shit matters. When it is about the survival and defense of your own nation and its survival and its territory and its integrity and its sovereignty, none of these other things matter. Everything else is up for negotiation. Bombing civilians, bombing children, women, war crimes of unprecedented magnitude. All that stuff is on the table when your survival is in the crosshairs. So on some primordial level, international law isn't real. You know what I mean? Not at the most basic level. However, the reason we have international law is so that there is penalties for escalation. There is penalties for using chemical weapons against your own people. There are penalties for using chemical weapons against other people, unarmed people, people who are not a part of the conflict. There is consequences for carpet bombing civilian areas. There's consequences for nuking people. There's consequences for engaging in all-out barbarism and escalating conflicts when it's not necessary. And the reason why is because you cannot control escalation. You don't know what happens. If two countries get into an all-out war and there's no way of stopping it, then it becomes a continental war. Then it spills into other nations. It destabilizes other nations. Then those nations try to mediate the war. Then they get involved. Then it becomes global. Then millions of people get killed. And it can all start from small local conflicts that spiral out of control because there was no way to prevent it from growing. There was no way to stem it. This is why we have international law. Now, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen with Venezuela, but degrading the international order in such a naked and imperialistic way is unwise. There are so many unknown quantities that you cannot account for. And I'm sure you guys can infer exactly what I'm talking about. There's a particular example, a particular war that I'm thinking about. People talk about it all the time. It's associated with the neocons. It is a prime example of this. We're talking about Iraq 2003. What happens? George W. Bush comes up with this fake pretext to go into Iraq. They invade the country. They get into a prolonged 8-year war. They try to nation build. They have Saddam Hussein stand trial, a complete sham trial, by the way. The tribunal was created under U.S. occupation, so it wasn't even a real court to begin with. You had defense attorneys being assassinated and threatened for trying to represent Saddam Hussein. So it was completely coercive. Millions dead. And then what happens? We bypass the UN Security Council, we bypass France, we bypass Germany, we bypass Canada. We want to invade regardless of what the laws are on a false pretense. Millions dead. And then what happens? You create a vacuum. Iran becomes the most powerful country in the region. Their ideology penetrates Iraq. It penetrates Syria. It penetrates Lebanon. So you go in, you invade this one country, and then it basically destabilizes the whole region. Humanitarian crisis. Sectarian violence of unprecedented scale. Shias versus Sunnis. This is when ISIS and Al-Qaeda formed. Sectarian violence across the whole region. A civil war in Syria. ISIS controlling major parts of Syria. And then what happens? People flock to Europe. And then what happens in Europe? Terrorism of unprecedented scale, of unprecedented magnitude. You had the Madrid bombings, 193 killed. People killed in France. People killed in Copenhagen. People killed in Manchester. People killed in England. People killed in Vienna. All because of one conflict. Iraq became an incubator for global terrorism. Iraq became an incubator for jihadism, as we know it. And now what? Now, because of what we did in Iraq in 2003, all these other countries think they can do the same thing. That's why Russia goes into Crimea in 2014. That's why in 2016, China rejects the UN's ruling on the South China Sea and the borders. And then it continues like this. Now what? Now if China wants to go into Taiwan and take over TSMC and dominate the entire global semiconductor manufacturing supply chain and put us at a disadvantage in the AI tech race, there's nothing we can do to stop it because we set the precedent for this kind of imperial ambition. And look, on a very basic level, there's nothing wrong with going into another country and deposing a leader and using military force. But at the very least, why not go through the pretext? Why not flirt with Congress? Why not flirt with the UN? Why not at least pretend like you're trying to do things the right way? Why keep everybody in the dark and then invade another country? Violate their sovereignty, violate their territorial integrity. And this is how the entire international order gets degraded. This is how it starts. Same thing with Panama, 1989. We go in, we take out Noriega. It's a short-term win. Everybody feels good about it. But then all these Latin American countries hedge against us because they don't think we respect their sovereignty. which makes it harder to work with them because they do not trust us to follow the law. They do not trust us to respect their sovereignty. In the OAS, now, spiritually, I agree with what Trump did. You go in, you're in and out, nobody dies. It's a very swift, very calculated, very limited mission. It's not a quagmire. You're not putting boots on the ground for an extended amount of time. You're not doing this nationwide occupation. You're not trying to turn the country into a democracy. It's very realpolitik. We want the resources. We want to capture the leader. We want to look tough, get this short-term geopolitical win, use this as a test trial for how we might deal with Cuba, because that's obviously on the table. Cuba and Iran are obviously the next targets. Okay, sure. You want to do these limited operations. It's quick, it's painless, we don't get bogged down. In a vacuum, that's not bad. But like I said, you just don't know how this affects the geopolitical equation worldwide, globally, the kind of precedent that it sets. Look at what Trump has been doing with Ukraine. All year, he had been pussyfooting. He had been riding the fence between Ukraine and Russia. One day he's supporting Zelensky, the next week he's supporting Putin, then he's back to Zelensky, then he's back to Putin, then he's back to Zelensky. And what this does is it scares all of your allies. They lose faith in you. Then they start to form a kind of plan to pivot away from you and hedge against you. South Korea, Japan, they're having talks about this. There was a report from this in Reuters not that long ago, from September, I believe, of last year. Japanese and Korean heads of state, because of the way Trump has handled Ukraine and Russia, are losing faith in America. They're thinking about pivoting. They're thinking about nuclearizing and rearming. So, it's just a cause for concern. And we have to be wise about it. Now, I want to tell you guys what Fuentes had to say about this situation. Now, here's what he said. This is from January 6th. Oh, wow, he wrote a lot. Jeez. I guess we'll just start with the most pertinent one. He says, so Russia can invade a country, killing millions. Hamas can kill hundreds of Israelis and take hostages, and Luigi Mangione can murder a healthcare executive in cold blood. But if America kidnaps one fat little Mexican, that's beyond the pale. Venezuela is literally built on kidnapping, by the way. We can do whatever the fuck we want. We are America. I like that Trump decided to kidnap Maduro because he was dancing. Wake up, bitch, you're arrested. By the way, he's getting ratioed on every single one of these messages. Normies memorize the anti-war slogans without actually understanding the arguments against war. The reason the Iraq War was a mistake is because it cost $1 trillion, or trillions of dollars, killed thousands of soldiers, created a quagmire with no exit strategy, and wasn't even in our best interest. Hemispheric defense is in our best interest. This operation had 0 casualties, it lasted hours, and cost no money. You could make the case that invading Iraq was a war for Israel, but a coup in Latin America can convincingly be called a war for America. I don't know. This is the one that got memed on. He said, I don't know. I just thought we were all on the same page. I cheered for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's pretty funny. He said, I cheered for Russia's invasion of Ukraine because that is a legitimate defense of Russian interests. It's in its contested sphere of influence. I feel similarly about Venezuela. Imagine being the dictator of a major country and you are literally pulled out of your bed in your pajamas in the middle of the night like a fucking bitch, and then they blindfold you and deliver you to the president of the universe in a sack. Bro was screaming, "Come get me." He's so jester. Raise up your sticks, trannies. This is for Yaya and Maduro. Hands off Venezuela. Your oil, our choice. Take your own side. American born American. I don't know what the fuck that means. So anyways, that's his position on it. And, he comes from the more realist school of thought, the Mearsheimer school of thought. His position on the matter is states, regardless of any pretenses about international law or diplomacy, will always pursue what ensures their power and security. And if that power and security comes at the cost of another nation's or another state's power and security, then they will, in all likelihood, take that action, as opposed to a more constructionist action, which is focused on diplomacy and harmony and these sorts of things, and ensuring liberal democracy. And generally, I think that's accurate. I actually generally agree with that foreign policy view. I don't think it's ideal, but I generally think that is how it tends to operate. States tend to operate based on what is in their perceived best interest, based on what ensures their power and security. That is unquestionable. But here's where I disagree with him. Generally, I think I'm becoming more anti-imperialist. I think that there's times when it is acceptable to do imperialism. You have to Finlandize other countries, and Finlandize means make another country your vessel. It's like what Russia does with Finland. Finland, until it joined NATO, was Russia's vassal state. It could not operate with an independent foreign policy because it was in Russia's sphere of influence. So it was basically a puppet for Russia. So I think we should Finlandize Latin America. I think we should make Latin America our bitch. But I don't think we should go in and start killing people and put boots on the ground. I don't agree with that. I think we should be imperialistic to a certain degree, but this kind of like naked invasion, bombing people's countries, that is just like, I don't think I can get behind that. And on some level, it's kind of immoral, And the reason I say it's immoral, look, I get it. States don't care about individual morality. States care about power and security. We have this tendency as individuals to project our morals onto states, which is not actually wise. That's not actually how that works. We seem to forget that. But I do think generally this idea that like might makes right makes for a really bad law and really bad foreign policy and just really bad social order. It's this idea that because I'm stronger than you, I can steal from you, I can rape your wife, I can take your shit, and there's nothing you can do about it because I'm stronger. I don't agree with that. I think that's immoral, generally speaking. Almost always. I think if you're going to use your strength, it should be to restore order and uphold the law and uphold stability. Because by this logic, this might makes right logic, genocide is okay, slavery is okay, imperial violence is okay, ultranationalist wars are okay. And I don't agree with that, actually. I think that's terrible. It's incredibly destabilizing and dangerous for the world. And it escalates to a point that you can't control in many cases, like with World War II. You start invading other countries and killing people in their country, it gets bad pretty quickly. That tends to be how that goes. Now, I think we did it in a rather tame and reserved way, but just generally on principle, I have my issues with this, seriously. I think you should go through the right legal channels, generally speaking, if it is not in your self-defense. And this obviously was not. We were not under any imminent danger with Venezuela. And by this logic, this might makes right logic, the Silicon Valley freakazoids like Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen and Elon Musk, they should have the right to harvest your organs if they're more powerful than you. They're more influential than you. They should have the right to determine state policy and flood the West with H-1Bs because they have more power, they have more influence, they have more control. They're more powerful world players, they have more status. They should be able to harvest your organs, harvest your brain, if it means advancing AI and advancing technology. They're more powerful than you, thus it makes it okay. In this hypothetical, which I don't agree with. I think that's insanity. The kind of cruelty you can get away with this mind frame. So that's my opinion on the Venezuela situation. I mean, look, I didn't really I think it was interesting, the whole conversation around Venezuela. A lot of people have been talking about it. I wanted to kind of calibrate my opinion on it first before I made a monologue about the whole matter. But that's just me. So my opinions are very simple. I generally favor stability. I generally favor the world order. I generally favor international law. I think it's in very rare cases where it's acceptable to be violated. And it kind of just leads to what we're seeing with Israel and Palestine. The genocide in Gaza. If international law meant anything, that would have never happened. But anyways, that's my point. If you guys disagree with me on international law, I'd be more than willing to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. But with that said, I wanted to briefly discuss the shooting that took place earlier today in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And the victim of this shooting is a 37-year-old woman. Her name was Renee Nicole Good. And she was a mother. She had a 6-year-old son. She was a Minneapolis resident. And the shooting took place in southern Minneapolis, not too far from where George Floyd was killed in 2020. And this story is nothing new. It was like this all year in 2025, all year. And this is basically how it goes. ICE is scheduled to raid a particular city, whether it's Minneapolis or Portland or New Orleans or Los Angeles or Charlotte, North Carolina. It does not matter. ICE is scheduled. They go in. They raid. You have protesters, leftist agitators, Democrat shills blocking the roads, preventing ICE from doing their job, trying to obstruct the federal government from enforcing immigration law. They get in the face of these ICE officers. They threaten them, harass them. They refuse to comply with basic orders. And then eventually the ICE officers get fed up. Somebody gets pepper sprayed. Somebody gets pushed, assaulted, tackled, or in some cases shot. Now that's rare and it is unfortunate, but it does happen. Now, I'm not going to defend what this ICE officer did in this particular instance, and we'll go through the video. It was pretty bad. I don't know why people are trying to defend it. It's a bad look all around. The bigger problem here is with these politicians. And it's like, look, man, we are a year into this administration. A year in. We're on year 2. We're about to go into the second month. And we're still doing this. It's still this circus act. Why are these people not being thrown in prison? The protesters, the politicians. They are intentionally trying to obstruct the federal government from enforcing immigration law to appeal to their voters. It's that simple. Whether it's Brandon Johnson in Chicago, whether it's Karen Bass in Los Angeles, whether it's Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, they are constantly obstructing the federal government, disobeying federal law. And at a certain point, you got to just go full Bukele mode. Bukele, the president of El Salvador, which is actually where my grandmother and grandfather are from. So thank God he's turned that country around. He's gotten it on the right path. But at a certain point, you got to just stop playing games. People need to get thrown in prison. People need to be charged with obstruction. The politicians need to face the consequences of the law. Straight up. Straight up. Or is it going to keep going like this for the next 3 years? Because if you don't do that, if you don't start throwing people in prison, if you don't make it clear to people the consequences of standing in between the federal government and deporting illegal aliens, if you stand in the way of that, you are complicit and you should be thrown in prison and you should be charged. It doesn't matter if you're a fucking substitute teacher or the mayor of Minneapolis. If you are getting in the way of the federal government from carrying out its popular mandate to deport every illegal alien in this country, you need to be thrown in prison, straight up. Why are we still playing games? We're 2 years in. We are 2 years in and we're still doing this. And honestly, at a certain point, it's more dangerous to let these politicians rile up their base. They're actually putting them in harm's way. Riling them up, getting them all emotional, getting them stirred up, getting them mad. That's how stuff like this happens. You're asking your entire city to come out here and protest and instigate ICE officers. All that does is increase the likelihood that some idiot does something dumb and gets killed or gets assaulted. You're creating unnecessary drama. You're creating unnecessary conflict. And the politicians are doing this. They're all in on it. Walls, Ilhan Omar, Jacob Frey, straight up, these people need to be thrown in prison. Or charged. I don't care. They need to be forced to deal with the law in some capacity. Because if it's going to be like this for the next 3 years, we're not going to get shit done. And I'll keep it real. This is killing the Republicans. Trump wants to talk about being impeached if the House or if the Republicans lose the House. You know, he's talking about this with the press. Oh, if the Democrats take control of the House, they're going to impeach me. It's like, well, you know what? You should have thought about that before bombing Venezuela. And all this other insanity that his administration is a part of. You should have thought about it before that. So I don't feel bad for him. But if he is serious about turning this thing around, if he is serious about getting this administration back on track and surviving until 2028, he needs to be able to deal with shit like this because this does not look good. And then he comes out on True Social and blames the woman, blames the victim. Really? How is that going to play with independents? Or even some of the more moderate Republicans? How is that going to play exactly? What exactly is that? I don't get it. He's creating unnecessary conflict and drama. He needs to hit these people with overwhelming force and send a message. If you do not comply with the federal government, and if you obstruct, you will be thrown in prison. There will be consequences. You will face the law. It's so simple. It is so simple. But we're still playing these games. And all he's doing is tanking his popularity in the process. So anyways, with that said, I want to show you guys this video. This is the video from earlier today. I'll give you guys a play-by-play on it. So here it is. I'm going to turn off the audio just for the sake of decency. But you'll be able to see it right here. So check this out. So right here, this is the woman who was killed. It's the woman in this Honda Pilot. And the woman who's agitating this whole thing is this chubby, stocky lady right here with the beanie and the shades and her little, what is this, a flannel, a plaid flannel. Now this right here is an ICE officer. She's got her phone out. She's yelling at the guy. But let's play this video. So as you can see, she waves this first truck out. Then this pickup truck comes through, and this is the ICE officer. He gets out. He goes to confront her. Then the guy in the driver's seat gets out, and he aggressively walks towards her door, and he starts tugging on it, presumably because he wants to... Let me turn off the audio. Presumably because he wants to remove her from the vehicle. And then she begins to drive forward, and this guy right here, this gentleman right here, as soon as this woman begins to turn her wheels to drive down the street, as opposed to moving out of the way, he only needed to move 2 or 3 feet to the side. He pulls out his weapon. He looks her straight through the window, pulls out his weapon, stands right there, aims, and shoots her. And to make matters worse, he's still aiming at her as she's driving away. And she gets killed. Now I'm going to show you guys another video, this time in slow-mo. I'll play the audio for this one so you guys can hear the gunshots. She's backing out, as you can see. She's about to turn her wheel. She starts driving. And as opposed to getting out of the way, the first thing he does is grab his gun. He stops. He stays in the way. He aims. His feet are planted, by the way. Shoots her once through the window. Shoots her twice while he's standing on the side of the vehicle. You could hear the second shot. He is not even in the path of the car. He's not even in the vehicle's path. Yet he still shoots at her even as he's clearly out of danger. And then he shoots a third time. So, pretty hard to defend that. And listen, look. Listen, guys. I'm not one to defend police brutality. I'm not one to defend clear, gross negligence, excessive force. I don't support that. I think all of that's terrible. And there are examples. We can just be real about this. There are police departments in this country that have, obviously this is not the police, but to give an example, there are police departments in this country that are pretty bad. That's just true. And you have agents, individual agents in this country who are not fit to be in the field. That is also true. And they do shit like this. They're trigger happy. They're quick to pull out their gun. They're anxious. They overreact. They're hypersensitive. And you put the wrong person in the wrong environment at the wrong time, and shit like this happens. Now, to me, that's pretty cut and dry. This guy basically killed this woman. I'm gonna just keep it real. We're not gonna defend what this guy did. I think what he did is pretty clearly indefensible. I don't know, like, we just be honest about that? We can generally be pro ICE, we can generally be pro law enforcement, but when you shoot a woman 3 times while she's in her driver's seat, and does anybody really believe this woman was trying to run this guy over? She waved off the first vehicle. It looks like she's trying to get onto the road. She's not even driving that fast. And even if she had hit the guy with her front bumper, it's not like he would have gotten hurt. He was standing right in front of her. And she wasn't even accelerating that fast. This guy stood there and shot her 3 times. Waited for her to turn her wheels and shot her. Then he got to the side of the car as she passed and shot 2 more times when he wasn't even in the way of the vehicle. There's no need to defend this. This is pretty cut and dry. And if anybody's kid would have been in that situation, they would think this is pretty terrible, undeniably. I'm just keeping it real. It looks terrible. It looks horrible. This whole thing looks horrible. Now, like I said, generally, you don't even want these people there. These people shouldn't even be allowed to be present during these raids because it always escalates. They pull out their phones. They're standing in the road. They're trying to block arrests. Every time that happens, jail. $5,000 fine. I don't care. You need to face some kind of consequence. And that I support. But in this particular case, this looks like gross negligence. I'm going to just keep it real. It looks like gross negligence. Looks like excessive force. His reaction time was good enough to pull out his fucking gun and shoot her in the face. So is his reaction time not good enough to take 3 feet to move out of the way of the vehicle? I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense. So anyways, that's my take on that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was a bit of a longer one, but we got through a lot of good stuff today. Very substantive episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. And until further ado, I am out.